Imagine dedicating your entire life to a single goal. A goal that, by its very design, is impossible to reach. Well, today we're diving into a story that does just that. It's a fictional novel built around one single, absolutely maddening philosophical paradox. It's a story about obsession, creation, and a national culture that has somehow turned not finishing things into a work of art.
And this is the question, right here at the very heart of it all. Just think about that for a second. If you actually succeed, if you finish the book, you fail. Your completed work proves its own central argument is totally wrong. But if you fail to finish it, well, then you succeed because you just perfectly demonstrated your thesis. It's a perfect intellectual catch-22.
And this exact trap has consumed a philosopher named Wertheimer for, get this, 37 years. For nearly 4 decades, he's been wrestling with this one all-consuming project, a massive treatise on the impossibility of ever completing anything.
And then, out of the blue, our narrator gets a phone call. It's Wertheimer, and he's claiming the impossible. He says the unfinishable work is, well, it's finished. And he extends an invitation, not just to visit, but to come and witness a philosophical miracle, or maybe a complete and utter catastrophe.
So, this impossible invitation, it's the spark that sets this whole journey on fire. Our narrator, who's also an Austrian intellectual, is, naturally pretty skeptical. I mean, how could this possibly be? But the idea is just too bizarre, too compelling to ignore. So he accepts.
And just like that, he's off. He starts traveling into the Austrian heartland, not just to see an old friend, but really to confront an idea that, logically, just shouldn't exist. A finished piece of work about why nothing can ever be finished.
Okay, but to really understand Wertheimer's obsession, we first have to understand the world that made him. See, the narrator views Austria not just as a country, but as a kind of philosophical condition, almost like a cultural disease. Our narrator argues that his entire country is basically afflicted with this condition. In his eyes, to be truly Austrian is to just embrace this state of permanent incompletion. It's a culture that doesn't celebrate success, but the magnificent attempt, the beautiful ruin, the heroic failure to ever cross the finish line.
And his critique is sharp. He compares Austrian intellectual thought to a rich pastry. It looks amazing, it's sweet at first, but ultimately it just leaves you feeling kind of sick. It's philosophy that's gone stale.
Even something like the famous Viennese politeness gets put under the microscope. To our narrator, it's not real warmth, it's a weapon. It's this highly refined, very elegant form of cruelty, a way to keep you at arm's length with a smile. It's all a performance.
And this all builds to his final diagnosis. Austria, to him, is a beautiful corpse. Yeah, it's elegant, sure, but it's preserved in a state of decay, totally happy with its own decline. And this is the intellectual landscape that gave birth to Wertheimer and his impossible project.
So armed with this pretty bleak view of his own homeland, the narrator arrives at Wertheimer's house. And it's here that the story really shifts from this philosophical takedown to some serious, high-stakes personal drama.
The level of obsession we're talking about here is it's hard to wrap your head around. The treatise has a first sentence, and that single sentence took Wertheimer 11 years to write. 11 years just circling one thought, perfecting the doorway to a maze he never actually planned to leave.
And this is that sentence. It's the entire paradox in a nutshell. Basically, because we are constantly changing, because we're incomplete beings, anything we create must also be incomplete. The work itself argues that it can never, ever be finished.
But then comes the catastrophe. After 431 pages, all arguing for the beauty of incompletion, there's a final page, page 432, a page that, by all logic, simply should not exist. It shatters the one fundamental rule of the entire project.
So here it is, the direct confrontation. On one side, you have the argument built over 37 years. Completion is impossible. And on the other, the final explosive conclusion, the thesis was wrong. It's an act of pure philosophical self-destruction. For Wertheimer, to finish his work is to escape that Austrian condition, but it's also, in his mind, his own death.
But an act like this, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. Wertheimer's catastrophic success unleashes this dangerous new idea into the world, and it starts to spread, almost like a contagion.
And the first person to get infected? Our narrator.
Seeing the impossible happen right in front of him completely shatters his worldview. The cynical, comfortable philosophy of incompletion that has defined his entire life is just blown to pieces.
He suddenly looks at his own life, decades of unfinished projects, scattered notes, and he sees it for what it really is. Not some noble philosophical stance, but simple cowardice. Not an ideal he was striving for, but a prison he had built around himself.
And the effect is immediate. Spurred on by his friend's terrifying success, the narrator goes home and does something he never thought he could do. He sits down and he finally finishes his own life's work. One completed text has now inspired another.
But the story doesn't end there. The final fate of Wertheimer and his world-breaking book is just as strange and paradoxical as the work itself.
And this is the final, perfect irony. After finishing his life's work, Wertheimer doesn't publish it. He doesn't show it to anyone. He gives the one and only copy to a random hiker on a trail. It disappears for 7 years, and when it finally turns up again in a bookshop, it's been burned, it's damaged, it is physically incomplete. The perfectly completed work ends up in a state of total ruin.
The price of completion, as it turns out, was absolute. For Wertheimer, finishing the unfinishable wasn't some triumph he could live with. It was an escape, but an escape that was also a form of self-destruction. He proved it was possible, and then he paid the ultimate price for that knowledge.
And maybe this is the final insight, the one drawn from our narrator's own finished work. The story doesn't pick a side. Instead, it suggests that completion and incompletion, they aren't enemies. They're two sides of the same coin. We're always in a state of both finishing and not finishing. We are all, in a way, completely incomplete.
And that's what we're left with. It's the central question of the whole story. Which is more terrifying? The prison of never finishing anything, being trapped in an endless loop of what could be? Or the catastrophe of success, of finally reaching the end, only to find that completion destroys the very thing, and maybe the very person, that created it?